Hey everyone, welcome to Wealth Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Reynolds, certified financial planner and owner of Elevation Financial. I'm on the web at elevationfinancial.com. Thanks for joining me today. All right, today we're going to talk about how to use the rule of 55 for early retirement. What is this rule of 55 thing of which you speak? Well, we're gonna explain it. So most people believe that their retirement accounts are completely off limits until age 59 and a half. The fear of that 10% early withdrawal penalty keeps many people from even considering early retirement. They just think, well, that's the way it is. But what many don't realize is that there are several legitimate ways to access your retirement funds earlier without triggering that penalty. And one of the most useful strategies for early retirees is something called the rule of 55. If you're planning to retire in your mid 50s, understanding this rule could really make your early retirement much more feasible. So let's dig into it first. What is the rule of 55? The rule of 55 is an IRS provision that allows you to withdraw money from your current employer's retirement plan without the 10% early withdrawal penalty if you leave your job during or after the calendar year you turn 55. So let's look at an example. Say you turn 55 on December 1st, 2025, but you decide to leave your job on November 1st, 2025. Even though you quit before your actual birthday, you can still take a penalty-free withdrawal or penalty-free withdrawals from your retirement plan because you left during the same calendar year you turned 55. The timing of your separation matters, but it's based on the calendar year, not your exact birthday. That flexibility can be really helpful when you're planning your retirement transition. So which retirement accounts qualify? This is where things get a little more specific. The rule of 55 only applies to employer-sponsored qualified retirement plans like 401ks, 403bs, and 457bs. It does not apply to IRAs. That's an important distinction. So if you've rolled your old 401k into an IRA, those funds won't be eligible for penalty-free withdrawals under this rule until you reach age 59 and a half. However, if you still have money in your current employer's 401k when you leave, those funds can be accessed penalty-free as long as you meet the age and separation requirements, and if the plan allows. We'll talk about that in a minute. So here's a key planning opportunity to consider. Consolidate your accounts if this is something that's going to be helpful for you. So for example, since the rule only applies to your most recent employer's retirement plan, rolling over your old retirement plans into your current plan gives you penalty-free access to a much larger pool of money. And you might even be able to roll over old IRAs into your current employer's plan, but you'll have to check with your plan documents. Not every plan allows this, so check with your plan administrator to see if that's allowed. The critical timing detail is that you must complete these rollovers before you separate from your employer. Once you've left, those funds won't qualify for the rule of 55 exception. So if you're considering early retirement in your 50s, it's worth spending some time reviewing your retirement account landscape now and planning any necessary consolidations well in advance. There are also some special rules for public safety employees. If you work in certain public safety professions, you get an even better deal. Qualified public safety employees can start taking penalty-free withdrawals after the year they turn 50. So this exception applies to employees who work for state or local government and provide specific services, including police officers, firefighters, EMTs, or corrections officers. It also covers several federal positions, including law enforcement officers, Customs and Border Protection officers, federal firefighters, air traffic controllers, nuclear material couriers, members of the U.S. Capitol Police, and members of the Supreme Court Police. So if you fall into one of those categories, you have a lot more flexibility to retire even earlier and access those funds without penalty. So let's talk about the separation requirement again. One aspect of the rule of 55 that trips people up is called separation timing. You must separate from service during or after the calendar year you turn 55. The reason for the separation doesn't matter. Whether you retire voluntarily, get laid off, resign, the rule applies regardless. But here's what won't work. If you leave your job at age 52, you can't wait until you turn 55 and then start taking penalty-free withdrawals from that old employer's plan. The separation has to occur in the year you turn 55 or later. This is different from other penalty exceptions that might be based purely on age or life circumstances. So, details are important here. Before you build your early retirement strategy around the rule of 55, there's one crucial detail you need to verify. Your employer's plan must actually allow partial withdrawals after separation from service. That's not always a universal feature. Some 401k plans only allow lump sum distributions once you leave. If your plan has this restriction, you'll be forced to withdraw your entire balance at once if you wanted to access any of it. And taking your entire balance in a single year could push you into a much higher tax bracket and end up in a massive tax bill. So that defeats the whole purpose of a gradual tax efficient withdrawal strategy. So contact your HR department or plan administrator and ask specifically whether partial periodic withdrawals are allowed after you separate from service. Get the answer in writing if possible. Make sure it's official. So let's say your plan doesn't allow partial withdrawals. In that case, you'll need to consider some alternative strategies, such as withdrawing from a taxable brokerage account first, or perhaps using a 72T payment plan, which has its own set of restrictions. So those are other things we won't talk about today, but there are some other options. So understanding taxes is important here. So the rule of 55 eliminates the 10% early withdrawal penalty, but it doesn't eliminate the income taxes. You'd be paying those anyway. You still owe ordinary income tax on the funds you withdraw from a pre-tax retirement account. And that's true whether you're 55 or 65. Doesn't matter how old you are. If it's a pre-tax account, you're going to pay income taxes. And that's why strategic tax planning matters so much in early retirement. You'll want to think carefully about how much to withdraw each year to avoid pushing yourself into unnecessarily high tax brackets. If your plan allows partial withdrawals, you can take just what you need each year and leave the rest to continue growing tax deferred. And this approach gives you more control over your annual taxable income. Some people use the rule of 55 strategically to reduce their pre-tax retirement balances before they're subject to required minimum distributions or RMDs later in life. By drawing on these accounts when you're in your 50s, when your income might be lower, you could potentially reduce future tax obligations when Social Security, pensions, and RMDs all kick in, which could increase your tax rate. So, side note, there are some other penalty exceptions to be aware of, just in case. The rule of 55 isn't the only way to access retirement funds without penalty. The IRS allows penalty-free withdrawals for several specific situations, including birth or adoption expenses up to $5,000 per child, first-time home buyer expenses up to $10,000 from an IRA, qualified higher education expenses from an IRA, and unreimbursed medical expenses exceeding 7.5% of your adjusted gross income. There's also exceptions for things like health insurance premiums if you're unemployed, emergency personal expenses up to $1,000 per year, and qualified disaster-related distributions. Also, we talked briefly about the 72T exception. That allows you to set up substantially equal periodic payments based on your life expectancy, although that has more strict requirements and less flexibility than the rule of 55. So understanding all those exceptions are important because it helps you build a more comprehensive early retirement strategy that addresses different needs and different circumstances. So is the rule of 55 right for you if you're planning early retirement? Maybe it's not right for everybody, but it could be right for you. So it works best if you have substantial assets in your current employer's retirement plan, if your plan allows partial withdrawals, and you're planning to leave your job at 55 or later, and you need to access those funds before age 59 and a half. It's less useful if most of your retirement savings are in IRAs, or your employer plan only allows lump sum distributions, or you're planning to retire significantly before age 55. So the key is to understand your options and look at all of the possible scenarios and options you have. So if you think you might retire in your mid-50s, start researching your employer plan rules now. Consider maybe consolidating accounts. Run the numbers on your expected tax situation. Early retirement can be achievable for many people, but it takes some solid planning and solid understanding of the rules. So, and be aware that, this is meant for early retirement. So make sure you're truly planning for early retirement, not just using it in a pinch or impulsive on impulse or something. So when used properly, the rule of 55 can give you really good flexibility and can make early retirement really feasible for many people if that's something that makes sense for you. All right. With that, thanks so much for joining me today, as always. You can contact me if you want to on my website, which is elevationfinancial.com. There's all sorts of ways to reach me there, including links to my social media. You can send a message through my website, or if you want to talk in real time and maybe consider becoming a client, you can book a free consultation right there on my website. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.